Here we are. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's another episode of Find Your Happy Nest. And I'm Lori Petro here with my dear good friend, Tracy Green.
Hello.
Hi, Tracy. 3 weeks we were off.
Yeah. I wish we were off like it was vacation and we were in, Trinidad or something.
Trinidad. That sounds very warm.
Oh, it is dreamy. I'm going. I'm planning a trip. Are you coming?
I will go. I mean, I have never looked that up on the map to know. I'm not a huge traveler. I'm very I'm just going to stay here in my United States, maybe some Mexico or Florida. I haven't really gone very far, but the trauma, I do have a lot of anxiety around traveling. That's sort of I don't know what it comes from. It may just be my natural personality temperament, but I know a lot of things that I've gotten over that I can do now because of my trauma. So that could be one of those.
Yeah.
But that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
The Wisdom of Trauma. There's a new movie out, and honestly, I don't know anything about these filmmakers. It's Gabor Mate that I just love, and his work and his books. I've been a huge fan of his for ever and ever and ever. Every parent educator that studies with me, that his books are on the list of my reading. They're on the reading list. In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Tracy, I don't know if you know that one. And you can get it on audiobook too. You guys, if anyone has been touched by trauma that you know of or addiction, that's what I love about Gabor. He doesn't just trauma isn't just something big happened to you, because we don't and that may very well be it, because I know you have had that kind of trauma. But it wasn't even just one big event, right? It was a long, slow burn of stuff.
A string.
Yeah, starting from when you were young, right?
Yes.
And so I love that they're talking, we're finally talking about trauma in this way that it's not just the thing that has happened to us, but how our bodies processed it. Did we have anyone to hold our pain, to share it with, to listen? And he goes through, well, I won't get too much into it, but that's what we're going to talk about. So I don't know if anybody watched the movie. It's a week-long event, but they also have really great talks every day, which I think is a whole thing where you can buy the whole package, but you can just listen. I'm listening to some of my favorite ones today based on just authors that I know. I know I could just blah, 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 about it. That's my view. That's what we're talking about, trauma. The wisdom of trauma, though, how we can take it and heal it. So, Tracy, what are your thoughts on the whole topic of trauma?
I like the idea of the word wisdom before it. It just feels so good, especially after going through so much, little and big. It feels like wisdom is right. Beautiful is another term that's great in front of it. Beautiful trauma.
Yeah.
I would change it if I could, of course, but for what I've been through, there's so much to it. There's so many layers to unravel and so many things to discover along the way while it's happening, during and after. And if someone is open enough or able to receive the door to walk through, to really discover it and walk through it, it's awful and terrible and beautiful all at once.
All at the same time. But what you said, if you can find that door to walk through it, and if you have someone holding your hand to walk through that door with you, I think that's key. And one of the takeaways from the series that I've had so far. So I don't know if you guys experience trauma or have thoughts on that and you're watching, definitely share those with us in the comments, because we're going to talk about some of that. I know, Tracy, you're like an open book. You're always willing to share your healing and your trauma and your healing, because you've seen both sides of that coin. And of course, I just want to state up front that whatever we talk about is not to say that we are responsible for our trauma, or for illness or sickness or anything like that. It's not to this mentality of, oh, this happened to you because you weren't a positive thinker. I think there's a little bit of that comes in that people misunderstand. And Gabor Mate is a medical doctor, and what he's talking about is how stress seems to be at the root of all of these, or one of the things that's a factor in all of these diseases that we get, all of these illnesses that pop up. But it's definitely not oh, don't take treatment, just think. It's not like he's like, still get treatment, but also we have to go in and say, what caused the trauma? Like, not just why are we sick, but what caused this pain to begin with that's going on. So he goes through healings with a lot of different people. So you had trauma like from a child, right? You had you had a big event, but again, like we said, it was a slow. Do you want to share some of that?
Well, yeah, well, I have to tell you, I prepared for today because as we were talking about trauma. So this is my vintage shirt from the 80s, my prairie shirt. That's where I incurred a lot of trauma in the 80s. So I'm wearing that. And I also brought my favorite comfort food, a giant cake.
No fair. I didn't bring any cake, but I have a muffin in there. Oh my God, that is hilarious.
Look how big it is.
Wow. It's so, it's shiny. Oh no, it's
it's just
background.
It's got a lot of green flowers on it. So it's kind of, being lost in my proscenium arch behind me. But
I want you to eat that. I don't want you to. You have to cut it. I would love it if you would just like dig in with a fork. And then you can cut around it after so your family can eat it. But let's just go, like, let's pretend that we're, yes. Because
that's a good idea.
Who's that civilized? You guys? Okay, I love this. All right, now tell me about what happened in the 80s.
Oh, it's my favorite. It's white cake with white buttercream frosting.
Is this what you used to get through?
Yep. My bat mitzvah cake was really good out of the freezer, just eating it with a fork. I was standing there, and that way I could hide eating it at the same time because I wasn't allowed to be fat. But yeah, so
all right, so there's like 7 different traumas weaved into that one cake there. Which one do you want to?
Well, I have to tell you something, an experience that I just had with a friend of mine, a really close friend that's in his 80s. And he revealed some things to me out of nowhere that I had never heard out of his mouth and about his childhood, and started sort of emoting and telling me and opening up about the recent TV shows that he was watching that were really deep, almost like novellas. And they really, he said, opened him emotionally. And he started being a little more romantic with his wife and like holding her hand more and saying, I love you. And she was a little surprised because he's always been a little tight with that. But he revealed to me in conversation, totally on his own rights, just came out with it and said that in his family, they treated him like he was nothing. He was the youngest of 3 boys and a big age gap between those 2 older brothers. His father passed away at 18. He was the handsome and very personable and really talented at a lot of things kid. And I know this of him, but for him to say that was incredible. And my response was, they treated you like nothing because they knew you were everything. And he had just trauma from the minute he came into this world, born into that. Also like Depression era kind of thing too, coming off of that. But I told him how lucky he is at this age to be able to realize that he can change or take a different road or not live the same story he's always lived, or even realize that he had a story to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, because it wasn't talked about, right? To have that stiff upper lip, or to, not talk about your feelings, to not complain, all of that was such, it was valued behavior, and anything other than, anything else would be looked upon as being,
Yeah.
It's just really, when we think about how much, well, that's the whole purpose of this series then, is to start talking about our trauma, to start saying, yeah, what happened? First ask, what happened to you? That's the Oprah series with Dr. Bruce Perry.
Oh, yeah.
So there's so much trauma awareness going on right now. And so we ask, what happened to you? And not why are you doing these behaviors? Like, that's what I love too about the addiction thing. And now here's the thing. Addiction is not just, it's not just substances. We can be addicted to work. We can be addicted to cake and sugar, and that's us. We're like, let's eat our feelings right now.
Yeah. And you helped me eat this on camera in front of people.
Yeah.
And admit it.
Which makes it and hiding. But here's the thing, right? So you used to be ashamed of this behavior, and we're ashamed of the behaviors that we have. Or we think that, I mean, there's so many different things. I don't want to say everybody's ashamed, right? I'm just talking for us right now. And then we think about those things and we think bad about ourselves because we have these behaviors. And then it's this cycle. Like, well, if we're thinking bad about ourselves, well, of course we don't deserve good things because we don't believe bad people deserve good things. Yes. So it's just, we're constantly like perpetuating these beliefs in ourselves based on this trauma that no one's talked about because it was something you just should have gotten through. But these behaviors were actually like survival skills. Like, you going to eat that cake was you trying to seek relief.
Yes, in my own world, in my own safety.
Yeah. And people who then are on substances, they are not seeking to do bad things. Like, there's very much this idea in addiction that it's a choice. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's not a freaking choice. It's just not. It's like, it's a compulsion because we need to feel good. We want to stop feeling bad. And we might be working. I'm a workaholic. A lot of the times I work away my feelings because I don't have to feel them. I get to focus on something productive, right? And then we value working. And all of a sudden, then we uphold this traumatic response behavior as something valuable. So then we perpetuate the system in that, because then we're like saying, well, these are good behaviors to have, these traumatic responses. Oh, you can just spin all the way around. So that's what the series is. So I know that we've talked a lot about behaviors and things that come out of that. One that and now you're able to, you said, eat freely. I can eat this cake in front of however many people are watching now and all the people.
Right. I could buy it at the store and say, I'm buying this cake for myself.
And not feeling connected to that. Like it's something that you have to do in secret to feel better. It's like you're now in control of that. It doesn't have to be that traumatic response anymore. It can just be cake you enjoy.
Yes.
Oh, Kylie is saying that she watched last night and she also loves Gabor Mate. So he's got the fan club. And hi, Renee. Renee is here. She's saying, yes. Wonderful discussion. So glad you guys are here watching. Trauma is, I grew up in an environment where I was never sure if I was in trouble. I definitely did not feel loved because my parents are divorced and my mom married a very violent, abusive man who hated me the most because I wasn't his.
I know.
And I didn't recognize all of this. And I'm not blaming. It's not like consciously he was like, oh, you're not mine. But it was all of this, his own trauma coming in and making him unwell mentally. And so I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel like I belonged. And I didn't feel, because I didn't feel like I was part of them. They all had a different last name. And then it was so contentious that I was abandoned for a bit by my biological father. So it's all this stuff. And then I was like, whoa, it's like I grew up seeing my own patterns going, well, of course, because you didn't believe this about yourself. And you thought, like, I just had this unconscious belief that I didn't deserve good things or that I wasn't worth, like, all this stuff. And then when I started to work through that, it was amazing. Like, the way that I felt, it was so different. I mean, it's a constant peeling, but it very much, I just am so glad that it's being talked about right now and brought to attention. And why I started Teach Through Love, which originally was to transform the emotional abuse of children. It was about verbal abuse and about changing the way we speak to each other. but based on this very violent, insensitive, you know, relational interactions that we have everywhere in society, not just in our families, but in our schools. And it's perpetuating. It is. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Thank goodness, though, I see it more and more with our children being talked about. I mean, at least here in Los Angeles, is being a bigger city, there's just more of a melting pot of ideas. But I do see that more in my community, at least, that like I can say to my son that I see it changing slowly, maybe not fully in his lifetime will we be fully aware and really taking on this subject in our everyday ways of mental health. But he'll see some of it, that it will be a part of his society. Thank goodness.
Yeah, hopefully that focus on how are you instead of what are you doing will take
Oh, yeah,
over,
exactly. How's school?
right?
Yeah, that's all I got. Yeah, my trauma came, I didn't even realize it, but I was whispered about a lot as a kid. But now, and I didn't know that till just now. Like my family would be at the grocery store and would see somebody at the end of the aisle, and then they would go down the next aisle purposefully because they just didn't know what to say to my family going through leukemia with my brother.
Yeah.
And it
And
really
was
was
it
like cancer.
like nowadays everybody has like GoFundMe's and all these things and everybody knows about. Then was it did anybody talk about it in your, like, were they like, oh, Tracy, how are you? Because we know you're going through so much, like not saying that directly, but, or was it
Oh,
buttoned up and just try to like
not at all. No help at school from administrators or teachers. I luckily had
wow.
beautiful teachers, quite a few, especially my fourth grade teacher specifically was incredible. I actually feel like I owe her so much, getting me through that initial trauma on a daily basis. But no, there wasn't that support. Towards the end of, after, I should say, towards the end of my brother's life and right after he passed away, I was 13 when he passed away. Here's my 80s shirt. And I did go to a therapist, a family therapist, for quite a while. But as we've talked about before, I put on a great show.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not that I was trying, but that was just my job.
I was going to say, tell people, because I know we've talked about that, but for anybody that's kind of like, we're like, I feel like we're giving them hints to what happened, but tell them about like this Tracy and how that persona evolved and why, because they talk about that in this movie.
Okay. Well, it actually goes as deep as my mother. My mother grew up as an older sister to a child that had some, I would call it bipolar. She was never officially diagnosed, but she had emotional issues. And it was quite obvious in a physical way as well. I mean, very obvious in many times emotional way. And this little sister was also gorgeous. She was born beautiful. In my grandmother's idea, she got the nice older child who's not beautiful, but then she got this emotionally distressed, beautiful child who she wanted, the beauty. So that's who she worked on. She thought she could work her because she was already beautiful. So there was already trauma going in of my mother believing she had to be perfect in every way. And so when my brother was diagnosed with leukemia, he was 12 years old and I was 8 years old. And I remember my mother and father sitting me down. Should I eat some cake now?
Yeah. Well, or no, actually, we just keep breathing. Don't eat cake, guys. This is where we're together, so you can tell the story.
It's true. I'm
take a breath,
tapping,
tap away, do a little.
Yes, but my mother and father sat me down and in a very thoughtful way asked me if I knew what the word neglected meant and they explained it to me. And I had this great idea of what to look for if it happened, and that I should let them know. Or we were just letting each other know that we're aware that it might happen to me because of all of this with my brother. So that definitely I thought it was really brilliant that they did that for the time, definitely.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like in this long run now, I'm seeing that it really gave me that whole thing of that, I took on the job of not letting that happen, that I would care for myself and care for them, especially emotionally. And I definitely, on my own accord, took that job on. And I became the tap dancing in the show face. And I really did tap dance, but I really took that to that level.
Yeah, you
And
became the entertainer to make everybody smile when they were down. And
yeah,
this is, you guys, we can just say that this is not to blame our parents or to
nope,
blame, like they talk about this in the movie too, about it's
yeah,
generational, it's passed down because we don't know about our trauma, and then we pass it on because our responses are traumatic, and then they traumatize our children, but unknowingly. So we know, we love your mom and she
oh,
loves you dearly, and
absolutely.
you guys have a relationship, and this is not to, and for anybody who's watching, this is not to blame you, your parents. Like, this is not about blame. This is about, let's just talk about our stories because they're so
Yeah,
important to how we have relationships now, how well we're able to like control our emotions now. And then we can get to like what we can, do in the world. But I just wanted to say
yeah.
that because so that was a response because
Thank
you probably saw that your brother had not that he had created it, but in your very little immature young mind, well, he was the source of all of the stress that your parents were having. Well, you weren't about to be that.
Right. 100%.
You
That is
know,
exactly right. Yes.
it's
Yes.
just like, and then we don't, but you're so unconscious of it that you just take it in. And I was listening actually to something on there, and I was thinking about you and wanting you to watch because I'm like, oh, I wonder if she resonates this, because it was about um like not wanting people to just think poorly or not wanting to disappoint people,
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
I don't know that, and that's why I'm not that I'm pointing it out in you, but I have such, like, I get to see the contrast because my trauma response is more to like pull back and then just like totally ice you out because I don't want to be hurt. Instead of trying to like please, I'm like, oh my god, I'm so scared of you. I don't even want to talk to you now. I'm going to go this way. Because in my childhood, I ran away and hid, and so that's what I ended up doing. It's crazy, and
Yeah.
this all
I'm
then seeps
opposite.
into us as in all of our relationships, right? With our partners, with our children,
Oh, yes,
and
definitely.
how we can reenact. I don't know if any of you guys watching, or are you aware? Have you dug into your trauma responses, or have you recognized or tried to work on any patterns like that, or know any ways that are good that I really want to try EMDR. That's one that I've
Oh,
never
yes.
done.
I
Um,
would recommend it.
yeah,
Seriously.
so I hear really great
Yep.
things about it, but it's one particular therapy. But I think that therapy, somatic, body based
Oh, it's
therapies are
incredible.
really important in
Yes.
this. And they talk about that. What do you think? I know you have personal experience here
Yeah.
now because you had a trauma. Anybody who's watched a few episodes know, but in just in the last few years that you use some of those
Yes.
different healings too, right?
Definitely. I'm definitely one that I've recognized it, that in the middle of trauma, the storm of it, for me to move physically or touch or what have you, or tap myself is incredibly, it just grounds me and makes me in my body and head settle
Yeah.
enough to be conscious, to think and function and receive or give whatever I need to do at that moment. Um, I digress.
That's okay.
Yes. So yeah, the pattern is very thick. So I after my brother passed away, it was a long fight of 6 years, but he ended up passing away from leukemia at 18 years old. And I walked around in my early 20s when someone would say to me, "Hey, what was your childhood like?" As we get to know each other in that time. And I'd say, "Oh, well, it was really pretty normal, except for my brother died of cancer after 6 years. But besides that, I took dance lessons. It was very normal." And I thought that I was doing that seriously in that tone, just blowing it off, because I was helping everybody else around me that was hearing that information.
Right.
Wow, I was
Yeah.
traumatizing them more to say it that way. It's
Or yourself.
ridiculous. Well, I
Because you didn't want
definitely
to
said that.
burden them. Right?
Burden.
The only way, this is what I took away from that series is, and many of you guys know Renee, I know she's broke trauma-informed yoga, EMDR, EFT, and water. Water. I know you know the
Water.
importance of water too.
Yes.
But the only way that we start to get through this is if we have someone, I wish I brought cake, I'm jealous now. Is if we have someone listen to us. He was talking to a young woman who had also had childhood trauma, and he said, "Well, who did you talk to about that when that happened?" And she said, "I talked to myself." And he said, "And who did you talk to?" And she said, "No one." He said, "That's the trauma."
Yep.
And it was like,
Agree.
we don't have anyone to listen, so we have to say it, and we don't need it, and we need to be, and that trauma and words or whatever we share needs to be received by that other person and not responded to with things like, well, they did the best they could, or they loved you, or that person, didn't mean it, or they're going through so much, maybe you should just be easier on that person if you want them as a friend, like all these things that we can make excuses for. And it's like, it's not about blaming. Again, it's just about, can you hear how this affected me so that I don't have to carry it anymore? Because we're carrying it around deep inside our state level of memory. Like, we're not saying, this isn't like Scientology where it's, stuck to our bodies, right? This is state level memory stuff. This is not, woo woo, tap it outside. This is like, this stuff is embedded in our memories, and we respond from this very primitive level.
Yeah. Well, and as we started to talk about patterns, that was something, again, in my early 20s, I saw right away, is the pattern that my father and my mother both had as siblings, having 6 siblings, and then me, 6 siblings. And I said, if I ever have children, this will not happen. Not only, I affirm no illness, but I affirm that this pattern will not happen with my children. Well, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer just 3 years ago. And it was the first thing I thought of. Nevin cannot have this pattern, this burden, this feeling, or whatever he may carry from it. And that is the first thing I worked on, is I need to have him speak with somebody. I already had a therapist because just 2 years prior to being diagnosed with ovarian cancer, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder called NMO, neuromyelitis optica spectrum, and put me on a cane and very debilitated.
You're a dilapidated person, Tracy.
I used to say that I'm broken to my dad. He's like, "Don't say you're broken."
Don't say that, right? Because that is almost like, just again, and I don't want to. I don't even. I'm not going to say it right now. Go ahead, keep on talking. Sometimes I just have to be cautious because I don't want to offend people.
It was very important that Nevin talk to someone. The therapist that I see is a family therapist, and also took him on as a client. To this day, the two of us both see him. It's so incredible.
Important.
At one point, my son says, "Oh, I think I'm done talking to him." And we talked about it a little more. And between him and his therapist, they decided, let's just try one more and then we'll see how you feel. Still, this is a year later that he said that. And he really is utilizing it. He sees it for everything and the gift that it is, to not ride around with this trauma, to have it move through him as an
Yeah,
experience.
whatever feelings are
Yeah.
coming up, because I'm sure he's been able to use that as a way to just support that emotional development for him. Like just always having that person to offload to. And that's what I
Right.
mean, we want in our schools if we get, and I'm not trying to put the burden on teachers because this is not to say
A lot.
teachers need to do more work. And I don't think that direct SEL instruction, like, oh, let's all sit around and talk about our feelings, is really going to make the change. Like doing SEL, social emotional learning activities, is great, but it's not the change. The change has to be in how I socially and emotionally relate to another human being, how every adult relates and how the children are hearing those adults relate to each other and how the children have someone to go to. A lot of schools do have guidance counselors now, which we did not. I don't, did you have that as a kid? I didn't have that.
Just high school, but it wasn't really anything.
But it was like, that was more for like when you were ready to go to college
Go to
or
college. Yeah.
choose like your electives. Like it wasn't for like, oh my God, I'm,
Yeah,
my
not
parents
at all.
like crazy stuff at home. It was not, at
I went
least
to the
I don't
school
know if it
nurse.
was, but.
I actually went to the school nurse
Oh, did you?
often. Since elementary school, since my brother's diagnosis, I was best friends with the school nurse.
So you went and sort of would you go because you like said that I need to go, like how did you utilize it? Like, did you say you had a stomachache or did you actually say I need to, okay.
Oh, there was a lot I needed the attention for the medical a lot.
Okay,
Someone
yeah.
to
Well,
validate me
you needed
because I
someone
didn't
to
get
say,
that.
look at me too.
Totally. Yeah, a lot. And then I would become friendly with that nurse because I was there often and she totally understood after a while. And it was a woman every single time. Understood and let me come there.
Well,
Tracy
that's
had a
nice.
headache.
That's someone so there's always, so it's those people too that if there was one adult that just you were able to connect with that was able to give you that support, that can really be the difference between whether you go down a road that's, not as healthy for yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever. Because again, we said there's all kinds of addiction. It's not just substance. It could be work, sex, food. Like there's so many things that we can use to push down that pain. But if we start building it in now is the most important thing. And of course, again, why I created my conscious communication cards, because that is like foundational level change.
Yeah.
If we can do that, if we can change not just like what we are doing to kids and the things that we're teaching them, but actually how we're communicating and how we're responding to their needs and how we're helping them regulate their emotions. The actual way that we're speaking to them makes so much difference. And sometimes we're just, again, we were talking about it earlier, like we're perpetuating these traumatic responses because of the way that we've learned to interact and the things that we uphold, like productivity and, doing well in academics and all of these things. And and of course, not, we know there are advocates, there are warriors out there in school, they're taking care of kids, but we're talking about the overall system coming from, just like your mom, coming from a time when beauty standards mattered so much that your grandmother would want her children to have the standard because she was afraid for them, not because she
Oh, yeah.
wanted to say one was better or one was worse, but because that was how she thought she was being a good mother and having, a good family and all of these things. And however that got passed down from her, parents' trauma. There's just so much. It
The
goes
number
on and
one
on.
song of 1923, when my grandmother was a young teenager, was Keep Yourself Beautiful If You
Oops.
Want to Be Loved.
Keep yourself. Oh,
Beautiful if you want to be loved. And the entire song is about before your man gets home, what to do to look good for him, that you should wrap your body in cellophane so you would be skinny.
oh,
I mean, it was a whole thing. Don't eat this, eat this. It's sad. And so the conditioning, even from generation.
yeah, yeah. My mom wouldn't go outside without makeup.
Lipstick.
Lipstick, at least lipstick, because that's only if she had to stay in the car, she would have to have lipstick. But if she
Yes.
had to get out of the car,
Oh, forget it.
then you had to have makeup on, the full
I
thing.
still get it. Put lipstick on.
You heard that too? What was
Oh,
so
yes.
funny? It was like, and I would respond with, "But why?
Let me have this.
I don't understand." Eat more cake. No, breathe with me. I heard that too. That must be such a just a generational thing to put on the lipstick.
Here's a big flower for you.
Stop. Now you're just torturing me. That's just mean
sorry.
that you're getting to eat
I
flour.
think I'm done.
I think you like dug all around the middle. I was thinking you would just like,
I wish you could see it, but with the green screen, it's hard. There's a big hole on the top. Well, yeah.
All right. Tracy did not share. Well, I hope all of you out there are eating some cake if you're watching.
Yeah.
Get
Next week,
yourself
maybe
some
I'll do
food.
another facial. I could use it after all the frosting.
Do not put the frosting on your face, Tracy.
Oh, no.
I know. I was kidding.
Oh, well, yes.
But did you get to watch the actual? Because there's the movie,
Yeah.
and then there are little mini talks after. And there's a whole series.
I haven't watched it yet. I'm definitely going to try to look at it today.
Yeah, definitely try to check it out. It's up all this week. So if anybody's looking, The Wisdom of Trauma, the movie is up all this week. But then they're having webinars every day that you can watch the replay. I think you have to pay to attend them live, but you can watch the replay. But there are some really, really great. They actually focused the movie on Gabor Mate. It was more like centered the story sort of around him to tell. And it was funny because they asked him if he had anything to add to the movie, what would he add? And he was like, well, I probably just wouldn't have made it all about me. He didn't say it just like that, but pretty much he's very like blunt. And it was like, oh my God, I just can just imagine what's going through the filmmaker's mind. It was hilarious. And they were like, well, you weren't the easiest to work with either.
That's great.
It was very funny. But so they didn't actually have, and he talked about some other wonderful trauma therapists and researchers. And some of my favorites are Resmaa Menakem is one. He's a clinical social worker and trauma. I don't want to get his title wrong, but he works with, he talks about racialized trauma, ancestral trauma, and he's just really, as a white person trying to understand how I have traumatized some of my dearest friends, it's been really helpful. He's a really wonderful writer, and he just makes it really clear to understand. So if anybody gets to check him out, I love him. My Grandmother's Hands is his book. I have that on audio, and he, I believe it's him that's narrating the audio book. So I've really enjoyed listening to that. And Dr. Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, these are all people who are finally talking. Not finally, they've probably been doing it for a long time, but they're finally getting the recognition and giving us ways to heal. Thomas Hubble is today. Hubble, I hope I'm saying that right. Renee's saying Thomas Hubble today, collective trauma, so good. So there's so many good talks, and you don't have to be like interested in trauma. This is really helping us understand more about, like, we've all been traumatized, especially at this point with the pandemic.
Yes.
This is
part really of our selves. It's really part of our makeup completely. Yeah. Our DNA, our genetics, everything.
Yeah. Our inherited trauma it's real. It's a real, science has now confirmed for us that it's not just that trauma is passed down. It's not. So some of our responses may just be changes in the DNA that are now have replicated for survival, but they're not necessary anymore. Just like, there's so much. There's a lot of really wonderful stuff. And like I said, you don't have to be like a trauma fanatic or anything to watch. It's just really great information if you have a story yourself of your own trauma, if you have, and maybe you've told some people, but maybe you have never really shared it. I actually recently shared a trauma that I'm 47 and I never told anyone this. And I shared it just this year. And I didn't think I would ever share it.
Wow.
And it was like,
It's
you
incredible.
just never know when you're ready
Yeah.
for something, for another layer to come off and help make you more whole. This is what is my other takeaway. I'm sorry. I'm just like so passionate about what they
I
were
know.
talking about. But when we have that, when we have things that happen to us and we don't have anyone to talk about it with, or we stuff it down, or we're not even aware that it's something bad that's happened to us, it's just
Right.
survival. Then what happens to us is we shut off the authentic parts of ourselves, the real part, and not authentic, like woo woo authentic, but the real expression of who we are, because we adapt to try to survive. And like you, I adapted to become this performer, and then I never got to be the full Tracy. I adapted to hide to stay safe, but then later, 20 years later, that reaction when I needed to be out there came in as like, oh, no, it's not safe, even though it didn't apply to the same situation. It's like that kind of stuff that we can be aware of. I just find it so wonderful for our society, because we just need to start healing
Yes.
stuff like that.
I think something that I've noticed in more young mothers and families these days that have unfortunately experienced miscarriage, I see them talking about it all the time. Their friends know about it. What can I send my friend that just went through a miscarriage to bring her comfort? What kind of food is best for her recovering body? I'm in a few private mom groups. And of course, as I've been part of it for so many years,
The
more young mothers
conversation
and people are
changes.
coming. Yeah, totally. And so all our kids now in my group, we're all have teenagers. But it's really amazing. I like to be a part of the group, not only to offer maybe some insight from my own experience with having older, but to see the change in the emotional support for women is incredible. I can't believe how many women are talking about miscarriages, and I'm so grateful they are, because it is a big trauma that no one even acknowledges, that has happened to your physical body as well as your emotions, what it does to your family. If you already have children, your parents, I mean, just
Well, women's health is not at all spoken about at all. Like, we don't even, not even from our own family. Like, we don't have, I mean, not, again, not everybody. There may be families that have the whole elder thing going on. Everyone gathers and teaches the girl about her female stuff. But
right.
I didn't get
But
that. Like,
no,
no one was coming
no,
around and talking about anything that really had to do with, whether be when you're as a young teen or as a young mother, like what happens to your body when you go through pregnancy. It was like always a constant searching. I think the internet has changed a lot of that right now, because now people can go anonymously and talk about their experiences, and then they also, oh my gosh, I had that too, and they gather, and then they become empowered to then stand up, because otherwise it's like you standing up and your family doesn't know, or friends. If nobody's talking about it, nobody really understands how, if it hasn't happened to you, especially, they don't know how impactful and how big of a deal it is.
Yep. I've had 3 miscarriages, and just was talking in front of my cousin, my close first cousin, and he looked at me like it's shocked. He had no idea. And I didn't know he didn't know. That's crazy to me.
He didn't know that you had the miscarriages.
3
Yeah,
miscarriages.
that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not
Yes.
something that was like, that would be
Even, yeah.
high. We have learned, a lot of cultures and a lot of families don't talk about what's going on too. It's like you keep that private and you don't tell about things when you have, illness going on. And it's definitely a mentality that that has its roots in
Yeah.
a lot of different places. But yeah, if you don't have, I'm telling you, you were going through it, and I don't even remember how supportive I was, because I don't really know how much I
What?
knew 15
I
years
didn't
ago
talk
about
to you
miscarriage,
about
because I
it.
didn't even
No.
really know. Like, my pregnancy was like surprise, so I everything else that followed. Like, I really don't know that I knew that much then about it either.
But you and Jen, I weren't expected to either, because it wasn't something that you talk about. It happened, and then you just keep going. And
But
maybe
that's
you
what I mean. Like, I feel like it's
oh,
so, like, it took
that
so
was what
long to even learn about it for me, even
yes,
though it seems
you
like
were right there.
something that I would know, and I was right there. And I remember you going through it, and I remember how, especially the very last time, how intense that time was. And I do remember connecting with you a bit, but I didn't talk about the miscarriage itself because I don't remember now, but I'm guessing that I
Mhm.
didn't have I didn't know
Yeah,
that it was probably one that um, just of intensive an experience, like I was learning about it through you. You're probably the first
right.
person that I ever knew that talked about it
Yeah.
openly that I knew. So yeah, those young moms and also what young mothers go through after pregnancy
Oh,
after birth.
after birth, because sometimes that focus is just 100% on that baby, and the mother is just over
Yeah,
there when
and if
the
she
mother
has a
can
hard
walk.
time, she's just expected to all of a sudden, like, fall into this natural
Yes.
role of, like, motherhood and
Nesting and yes.
yeah, and it's all, like, birds and butterflies, and you're like, it's pain and tears and, like, sore boobs and all kinds of things.
All kinds of things. Yes.
So,
I know.
those are definitely experiences, and that's what becomes so it's not traumatic that these things happen, right, always. These are experiences that are difficult, but when we don't have someone to talk about those experience, that's
After.
when he said that's when the trauma comes. So it's not always something that happens that's big. It's sometimes just not having anyone to tell our stories to share our pain with, and then it
Because
creates that.
bringing it back to beautiful trauma, or even just the learning from it, the wisdom of it is it's, well, I'm getting all verklempt. I got to eat some cake.
Yeah, you're supposed to keep
All
breathing.
right.
The wisdom. That's how we'll end because
Yes,
that
it
was
comes
the
back. What I was going to say is not the experience of trauma is the door. And what shuts the door on that trauma is not is shutting down from the trauma. But that experience itself is actually can be a beautiful thing. It's a whole new experience. Maybe in being a trauma, maybe it's something you've never experienced before. You
it
can
opens you
utilize
up
it.
to something a
Yes.
new because you changed, right? Your everything is changed when you've had that experience, and now you have to adjust.
I'm grateful in a lot of ways for cancer and the NMO diagnosis. It really turned my entire life upside down and around. But I'm actually grateful for the opportunity. It put me in a different place. It gave me the opportunity to open the door and even process so many things from all that time ago when I was a tiny little girl.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yes.
mean, and you did every healing, like from all the traditional to so much work on saying, why am I in pain? Like, why am I sad, angry, those emotions, right? Like, you did so much work going, why does Tracy feel this way?
Well, it's interesting. So, just one of the reasons we weren't here the last week or so is my mom ended up in the hospital, and she is going to be okay. It was some crazy medications interaction that sent her system nuts, but she responded right well. She's hopping right back up.
It was so
Beautiful.
scary, though,
It was so
like,
scary. Are kind of like the first big thing to happen in their older years. Not that they are senior citizens in any way. They bop around like nobody's business. My father's still a professional handyman climbing friggin' ladders. I
at
could just
80.
kill him. He is
Oh, was
82.
I supposed to say that?
Oh, right.
82. But
He's
just
82.
wanted to tell his age. Oops.
And I'm so excited. My mother's big birthday is this year. Not saying it out loud, but anyway. Uh, but so it was like kapow, a big trauma, and it really sent me. And of course, since this whole year and a half with the pandemic and me staying home and isolated for years before that too, it was sort of the first big giant thing out of my own personal health to hit me that I needed to respond and have a responsible part for. And
Right.
so my head was just spinning and it was full of trauma. But then I found myself, it was days of that, upset and trauma and not really even being able to think consciously, just doing. But
Well,
then,
yeah, you're having that acute
yeah,
experience,
totally.
know?
But then it hit me. It's like all of these tools that I have gained from these years and the classes and the different modalities, it just kicked in as a concrete floor for myself, big grounding. And it just kind of naturally kicked in, like the way that I speak with my son, too, in
Yeah.
that conscious way. And I felt energized. I felt physically okay. And by the end, I was exhausted, but I had traveled through it in a more concrete way. And I wasn't a mess at
You
the
weren't
end.
a mess at the end. You weren't still all frazzled. You had
Oh
gone through, and it's like that's the road that you want to. That's like the processing, right? You're in it. It's crazy. You're holding on. Your stress response goes, I need to just brace for what's happening. And then you move. Is that when I called you? And I remember saying to you, you sound good though. You sound like you've
that night.
got,
Yep.
yeah. And it's like, so you had, it was crazy getting there, but then you just like, you rose to the occasion. You were able to get it done. You sounded really confident. And there's, it's a lie. You had to deal with all these different, people to try to organize things for them. And then, like you said, then you got home and then you needed to rest, right? So you went through it and then you survived it and you organized and you worked and then you rested and you weren't overwhelmed and crazed at the end like you may have been without if you had not had those
Yeah.
tools.
I felt really proud and very successful and accomplished. And it didn't have anything to do with making money and getting a paycheck.
Oh, which we didn't even get into that. Oh, that can be such a
That
trap.
drama.
That one, that trauma, that making
But
that and then getting the reward center and now, oh, I'm valuable. And then, oh, well, we will have to save that for our next
yeah,
episode. We're going to come back though. So we missed a couple of weeks because there was a lot going
what's
on.
going on?
But we're here. It's June.
Summer.
Summertime over here. So we're gonna come back next week. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks
Next
everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks
And
for letting me talk.
yeah,
That was really
awesome. We're
good.
gonna keep the conversation going about trauma though. I would love to hear more of your stories out there. If you're watching, let's keep the conversation going in the comments here. We can definitely do that. And I just think it's super important. Like if you have something that you haven't shared, I'm not saying share it with us in the comments, but if you have something that is painful that you've been holding that you've never really shared or you don't feel like has really been heard, know that that is valuable. That it deserves to be seen.
Yep.
It deserves to be heard. You deserve to have
Say it.
someone say what?
I said you deserve to say it.
You deserve to say it and
Yeah.
have someone validate it and say, yeah, that freaking sucks that happened to you, and not dismiss it or invalidate it by, just whatever, making what we do, all the judgments and the blame and the shame or it wasn't that big of a deal. We can do so much, but we don't have to. So we're going to keep talking about trauma and we'll keep talking about it in the conversation or in the comments. And then we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Tracy.
Ooh. Thanks, Lori.
I'm going to bring cake next
Beautiful.
week.
Okay. I'm eating it now because I like it.
You go eat. I got to go buy some. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Oh, and if you have any email questions, send them to Lori. And we can put on our show to talk about.
Oh, that's right. I didn't mention that. We were going to
Yeah,
do
to have people talk.
one question of the day kind of
Oh, yeah,
thing.
yeah, we'd love to do that. If anybody would like to send us something that we can discuss, we can make your question of the day.
Do it.
Yeah.
Anything going on. That's when we can talk about how to use, how to be more conscious in our communication, how to really connect with people and create stronger relationships. That's what we like talking about. And regulate ourselves.
Okay.
Find your happiness, everybody. See you next week.